I'm a photographer working in Jodhpur, India right now for Photographers Without Borders. We are working with the SAMBHALI Trust on a project about women's empowerment.
SAMBHALI Trust, the film from India, the interesting film about kind of like bringing this community together. The gentleman at the end saying sticks, like how one stick can break in two. I think it was from Planet of the Apes. I remember that same kind of analogy. Where basically, of course, 30 sticks, it's harder to break together. So that's sort of the theme of that movie.
Just that I really appreciated how, even though they were discussing sometimes horrible treatment of people, specifically women, that the imagery still celebrated like the joy, the beauty, the incredibleness of all these individuals. It was cool for such positive imagery to be addressing and carrying on a story that really is so sad.
Isn't it amazing that it's 2018 and this is like, it just puts things in perspective. And so for me, like how ignorant sometimes I am, or sometimes we can be, like how like this is still going on.
It does amaze me that in 2018 this sort of discrimination still exists and on such a pervasive level. And you also see it, in the first movie as well, the first documentary, where 2018 and there's still racism and riots and people being excluded, and it's just heartbreaking. And if it hadn't been, I think, for the few positive comments here and there in the movie, we'd all just be really down about the whole world situation. But when you see how people are succeeding and doing well and getting along better despite very difficult circumstances, their community's basically turning against them, that gives me hope, that's for sure.
This is one of those films that kind of gives us a little bit of a tease of what's happening here, but of course it leads to more questions. You want to know what's going on with this community. Go ahead.
It's funny because they expect everybody's society to accept what's happening, like being a widow, and then you have the discrimination within your own family, that even their own families are willing to accept it, and then they want the outside world to accept it. The family life has to change in order for the outside world to get accepted. If they're not willing to change within the family, then I think it should start there, because the woman was not accepted because she was about the inheritance. That's the family. I think it should start there too.
Personally, I found it really interesting that it was a male that was running the organization. I felt like it was like a big step in like self-awareness and like, especially being the age that he is, because he doesn't look like he's that much older. Like growing up in that situation, it's kind of harder to kind of draw yourself out of like the accustomedness of like what you're growing up in, the traditions of like your surroundings. So I found it extremely like uplifting.
So if it is so much in our system, how do we get it out of the brains of the people?
But he has experience, right? Because his father passed away, so he personally was reflected by the ignorance that was happening in that culture, right? So that's the power. Like he took that negative and hopefully turned into a positive in many ways, right?
Going back to what this person said about the family, it's sometimes your family, until the situation happens to them, they can just be completely ignorant and uncaring and unhelpful, and I think in certain situations they're more concerned with their own survival than reaching out and helping someone else, and it's easier just to fall back on tradition rather than try and change centuries of ingrained traditions. So
yeah, the key word is tradition, because that's what happens in that culture. So we just end up doing what we're all guilty of that to a certain extent. And of course, we need to always kind of shock that system, which is happening in our society too, right? Where enough is enough, right? So in many ways, but of course it takes a long time for change to happen, perhaps too long, right?
Just so glad that iconic Canadian filmographer blessed that movie, because it was sensational, and and I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but you're going to do that for me.
No, I'm pretty bad. Deepa Mehta, you're talking about?
Thank you. Yes, because that was so appropriate that she was a part of that film as well, to say, yes, this is the police, the caste system, the family, and yet there's the blessing of certain people that should be in every province.
And so, just to jump on that point, so if you guys can Google afterwards or on the quickly on the break, just to Google Photographers Without Borders. They make a mini films. This is the third film that we've shown this year from Photographers Without Borders. And I think the filmmakers are here, right? Can you raise your hand? Danielle? Oh, there you are. Sorry, they're over there. Yeah, so they're right there. So they do a lot of great things. You can watch their films online as well. So just Google Photographers Without Borders. You can see their films. This is, like I said, this is the third one we've shown this year. Are we going to see more in the future months and years? Yeah. There you go. So they're doing a lot of great things with their site, and they're really kind of making some really impactful films. So just kudos to them for making this film.